the media doing everything it can to try to pin this on Trump and say Trump had something to do with the Epstein files in a nefarious way, they don't stop, even if it means that they have to literally falsify evidence, literally manipulate recent disclosures in an attempt to not surreptitiously, but dishonestly and disingenuously implicate Trump where there was no wrongdoing. You saw the news of the day. I'm going to bring up the picture of the day, and then we're going to get into reminding everybody as to how things work. Past is prologue, and if you don't learn from the past, you're going to remain pretty stupid. Congresswoman Yasamin Ansari puts out, I mean, it's so stupid, it defies words. Vile, disturbing. Do we know what that is? That's an opinion. Hyperbolic. Disturbing is an opinion, and an unhinged one at that. New photos, thus far I think I only see one photo. Vile, disturbing new photos of Donald Trump that raise even more questions about knowledge of abuses at Epstein's estate. I try to make sure before I jump down someone's throat that they are in fact dishonest and malicious and not, I don't know, phrasing a tweet badly. I didn't know who Congresswoman Yasamin Ansari was. And then when I found out that she's a Democrat, I'm like, all right, well then call it prejudgment or whatever you want to call it. Preconceived notions that Democrats are liars. And that's not to say that, some Republicans are not. We're going to talk about Dan Crenshaw in a bit. I know that now this is just absolute dishonest bullshit. Vile, disturbing new photos of Donald Trump that raise even more questions about knowledge of abuses at Epstein's Island. Oversight Dems are demanding the DOJ comply with our subpoena and release the full Epstein files. Stop protecting pedophiles. Survivors deserve justice now. And I'm going to weigh my words. The Itch Bay puts out this photograph with redacted faces, blacked out faces. It looks so scary. The angle's scary. It's black and white. It looks scary. Donald Trump looks happy. Now, if you look at the picture, the first, and I'm not trying to be glib or minimize anything, just to highlight the obvious, these are not girls, as far as anybody can tell from this photograph. These are adult women based on physiological development. Now, they could be young, and I don't know. But they don't look like underage based on physiology. They're wearing leis around their necks, like, what they have in Hawaii, or, like what they have at beauty pageants. Because, like Donald Trump had a little something to do with beauty pageants. And when you understand what the Democrats have done in the past, you might be able to identify what they're doing in the present, try to do it again in the future. Redacting out the faces so that nobody can identify who those women are or were, where they were, and whether or not this is a totally innocuous pageant type event or other innocuous event that is being made into something far more sinister by virtue of the blacking out of the faces. You've all seen that skit, Unnecessary Censorship, where they would bleep out words that were not swear words at all, but would be bleeped out in a way that sounded like they must have been swear words. Like there was a clip I remember, it's like, when I was young, my mother told me to, be polite, open the door for strangers, say thank you. And they bleeped up the thank you, and it sounded like say thank you. So it sounded like he said, say fuck you. The unnecessary censorship can cause people to interpret things badly and wrongly. The unnecessary censorship here can cause people to come to unjustified, ill-founded conclusions. The unjustified censorship that they did at the exact same time as the last release, where they censored the name of one of the Epstein sex abuse victims to suggest falsely, or at least in false light, that Trump had spent hours with one of Epstein's sex victims, when that name that had been redacted was Virginia Giuffre, who at one point had worked for Mar-a-Lago, and at multiple points said that Trump never did anything wrong to her, that he was quite the gentleman, and had exonerated Trump on multiple occasions. But they redacted the name so that nobody knew which Epstein sex victim it was, so they wouldn't be able to do that verification to see that it was bullshit framing, because the sex victim is one that had already exonerated Trump on multiple occasions. They got caught doing it. And what do narcissist, psychopath, Darvo, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender assholes do when they get caught? They lie some more. Listen to how Jen Psaki framed this when the Democrats got busted for releasing documents that were maliciously and dishonestly redacted to suggest something that they didn't suggest. Listen to what Psaki has to say about it. They care so much about victims, they are willing to exploit them for their own political purposes. They redacted the names to protect them, and it was the Republicans who were wrong for exposing the fact that the Democrats redacted the name of Virginia Giuffre so that the world could know that Trump had spent hours with a victim of Epstein's sexual abuse who had already exonerated Trump on 2 occasions. Listen to this.
And they are trying to use the name of an Epstein survivor to get away with it. Yesterday, the very first email that the Democrats on the House Oversight Committee released showed Epstein writing Ghislaine Maxwell to say that Trump was the, quote, dog that hasn't barked, and that a victim spent hours at Epstein's house with Trump. The Democrats on the committee redacted that victim's name,
to protect
as
her.
they've tried to do with the names of all of the Epstein survivors, in part to allow them to tell their own stories on their own terms.
She's dead, by the way. Virginia Giuffre's
Within
dead.
an hour of the release, the Republican majority on the House Oversight Committee promptly outed the victim as Virginia Giuffre, apparently doing so just so they could point to past statements of Giuffre's in which she said she had never seen Trump do anything wrong. So again, they're outing an Epstein survivor for political gain.
She had long already taken her own life when this lying sack of human filth, Jen Psaki, is suggesting that Democrats redacted the names so that the victims could tell their own stories, knowing that the one that they redacted is dead and could never tell her own story, which she had already told twice, which exonerated Trump. Can you believe that anybody can actually be this evil? She speaks with a serpent tongue. She is actually an evil, disgusting woman. Jen Psaki, I'm talking about right now. Listen to this.
The Republican majority on the House Oversight Committee promptly outed the victim as Virginia Giuffre, apparently doing so just so they could point to past statements of Giuffre's in which she said she had never seen Trump do anything wrong.
But understand this as to how maliciously deceitful this scumbag SOB is. She says the reason why they redacted their names
Tried to do with the names of all of the Epstein survivors, in part to allow them to tell their own stories on their own terms. If
they redacted the names of the victims to allow them to tell their own story on their own terms. She's dead. She's already told her own story on her own terms, and they redacted the name anyhow so that people could think it was in reference to another victim who had not already told her own story on her own terms on multiple occasions. Jen Psaki, I hope it was worth the price of your soul. There can't really be much more that is disgusting in terms of behavior than that. I mean, by her own admission, by her own strategy, they redacted the names so that the victims could tell their own stories on their own terms, knowing that they redacted the name of a woman who was dead, who had already told her own story on her own terms that exonerated Donald Trump. And then they fault the Republicans for revealing the deceitful exploitation of trafficking sex victims that the Democrats did. How much worse of a human do you have to be? And I guarantee you they did the exact same thing this time around. Malicious, unnecessary censorship redactions to suggest some sort of impropriety. And I would bet good money on it. I wouldn't guarantee 99.9%. I'll just pick a random number, 96.7%. That photograph is from an innocuous event, probably a pageant. And they did the exact same thing now that they did back then by redacting for the purposes of creating a shroud of accusations and dirty looking behavior. And Jen Lizard Tongue Psaki at the time basically told you exactly what they did. They did it again, and they will try to do it again in the future. And it is up to commentators and analysts like myself and others to put it on blast so that you understand they lied to you in the past, they lied to you in the present, and they will, gosh darn, lie to you again in the future.